Imagine you're at your lowest, feeling like no matter how hard you try, you're just not good enough. Now, picture this. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson walking through the doors, looking right at you and saying, "You got this." Sounds like a dream, right? But for this group of struggling young athletes, that moment was as real as it gets. And what happened next? Well, it's the kind of story that stays with you forever. It was just another grueling day at the training facility, a rundown gym on the outskirts of Los Angeles. The walls were cracked, the equipment was old, and the smell of sweat and disappointment hung in the air. This wasn't some high-end sports academy. It was a place where dreams came to either survive or die. For the group of young athletes inside, the struggle was real. Some were high school players hoping for a scholarship. Others were college dropouts still chasing the dream. And a few were just kids with nowhere else to go, clinging to sports like it was the only thing keeping them from falling apart. They had heard the usual speeches before, coaches, parents, mentors, all telling them to keep pushing, to never give up, but those words were starting to sound empty. When you're battling self-doubt, injuries, and financial struggles, motivation isn't always enough. Then, out of nowhere, the gym doors swung open. A massive, towering figure stepped inside, his silhouette blocking the afternoon sun. There was no introduction, no announcement, just pure presence. Dwayne Johnson. At first, no one moved. No one even breathed. Was this some kind of prank? Some kind of impossible dream? But The Rock didn't waste time. He clapped his hands together, looked around the room, and with that signature grin, he said, "All right, let's get to work." And just like that, the game changed. For a full 5 seconds, no one moved. The weight of the moment was too unreal. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, the man, the legend, the Hollywood superstar, the former wrestling champion, was standing right there in their busted-up gym like it was just another day. Then reality hit. Chris, one of the high school athletes, was the first to react. He turned to his best friend, Jamal, and muttered under his breath, "Bro, are we dreaming right now?" Jamal didn't answer. His mouth was still hanging open. Dwayne Johnson took a step forward, scanning the faces of the stunned athletes. He could see it in their eyes, excitement, confusion, doubt. They were wondering the same thing. Why is he here? "Y'all look like you just saw a ghost," Dwayne chuckled, clapping his hands together. "Relax, I'm real. I promise." A nervous laugh rippled through the group. Some of them glanced at their coach, an older man named Coach Harris, who stood with his arms crossed, shaking his head in disbelief. He hadn't been expecting this either. "Listen," The Rock continued, his voice steady but full of energy. "I know you're probably wondering what I'm doing here, right?" Everyone nodded. He smirked. "Well, I heard there was a group of young athletes out here working their asses off, chasing a dream, but hitting a wall. And I don't like walls. You know what I like? Silence." Then Chris mumbled, "Breaking walls?" Dwayne pointed at him. "That's right. Breaking walls." He walked to the center of the gym, placing his massive hands on his hips. "I've been where you are. I know what it's like to feel like you're grinding day in and day out, but you're stuck. I know what it's like to have doubts. But I also know one thing. There is no dream too big if you're willing to put in the work." Chris, Jamal, and the others exchanged glances. Their coach had given them plenty of pep talks before, but this was different. This wasn't just motivation. It was experience talking. Dwayne's expression turned serious. "I didn't come here to give you some feel-good speech and walk out the door. I came here because I want to see what you're made of. So tell me," he clapped his hands again, louder this time, "are y'all ready to work?" For a second, there was hesitation. Then, like a switch had been flipped, the entire group erupted. "Yes, sir." Dwayne grinned. "Good. Then let's go." And just like that, the hardest, most life-changing training session of their lives was about to begin. "All right, let's see what y'all got," Dwayne said, rolling up his sleeves. Coach Harris still looked stunned, but quickly snapped back to reality. "All right, kids, you heard the man. Line up." The athletes rushed into position. Some of them were still processing the fact that The Rock was about to train them, but they knew one thing. There was no way they were backing down now. Dwayne walked down the line, his eyes sharp. Before we start, let's get one thing straight. I don't care where you come from. I don't care if you've been counted out. The only thing that matters here is how bad you want it. Jamal, still hyped, nodded. We want it bad. Dwayne raised an eyebrow. Do you? Because saying it is easy. Proving it? That's a whole different beast. He pointed to a stack of weights in the corner. We start with strength. 10 reps. Each of you, one by one, the athletes stepped up. Some lifted with ease. Others struggled, but every single one of them gave it their all. Chris pushed through his reps, his arms shaking by the 8th rep, but he refused to stop. That's it, Dwayne encouraged. Push through. It's supposed to hurt. That's how you grow. By the time they finished, they were sweating like crazy, but the rock wasn't done. Next, he announced, we hit the track. Sprints. You have 1 minute to give me everything you've got. Some of them groaned. Dwayne smirked. Oh, you thought I was here to make this easy. By the 5th sprint, Chris felt his lungs burning. His legs felt like lead. His body was screaming at him to stop. Jamal wasn't doing much better. Bro, I can't feel my legs. But then, the Rock's voice cut through the exhaustion. This is where most people quit, he said. This is where the average gives up. But you're not average. Chris gritted his teeth. I'm not average. With everything he had left, he pushed himself forward. The others followed. Dwayne watched, nodding in approval. When the sprints were over, they collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air. The Rock knelt down. That's how you break through. The next day, soreness hit them like a truck. Chris stared at his reflection in the gym's bathroom mirror. Man, am I really cut out for this? Doubt. It was creeping in again. But just as he was about to let it take over, a deep voice echoed from behind him. You're stronger than you think. Chris turned. It was Dwayne. Chris stood in front of the bathroom mirror, gripping the sink as he stared at his reflection. His muscles ached like never before. His legs felt like they were made of lead, and his mind was clouded with doubt. He had pushed himself harder in the last 2 days than he had in his entire life, and yet a small voice in his head whispered, maybe you're not cut out for this. It was the same voice that had haunted him for years, the same voice that told him he wasn't fast enough, strong enough, or talented enough. He had fought against it every day, but now, standing here drenched in sweat and exhaustion, it was getting louder. As he exhaled, the door behind him creaked open. You're stronger than you think, kid. Chris spun around. Dwayne Johnson stood in the doorway, arms crossed, his towering frame taking up most of the space. Chris straightened up. Oh, hey, Mr. Johnson. Dwayne smirked. Just Dwayne is fine. He stepped inside and leaned against the wall. You got that look in your eye. I know that look. Chris furrowed his brow. What look? The one that says you're thinking about quitting. Chris hesitated. I mean, I wouldn't call it quitting. He sighed and shook his head. I don't know if I have what it takes. Dwayne let out a deep chuckle. Man, let me tell you something. I wasn't born into this life. People see me now. Big movies, big muscles, big success. But what they don't see is where I started. Chris listened as Dwayne stepped forward, his tone shifting to something more serious. There was a time when I had nothing, man. Just $7 in my pocket. That's it. No big Hollywood dreams. No wrestling career. No security. Just me and a choice. Chris swallowed. What did you do? Dwayne's eyes locked onto his. I got to work. Silence filled the room for a moment before Dwayne continued. You think you're struggling? Good. That means you're in the fight. Every great success story starts with pain, with setbacks, with doubt. But the difference between the ones who make it and the ones who don't. He pointed at Chris's chest. It's this. Your heart. Your mindset. That's what makes a champion. Chris took a deep breath. Maybe he wasn't alone in this feeling. Maybe doubt wasn't a sign of failure. It was just another obstacle to push through. Dwayne clapped him on the shoulder. Now, you going to keep questioning yourself, or are you going to get back out there and prove that voice in your head wrong? Chris looked at himself one last time in the mirror, then nodded. I'm going to prove it wrong. Dwayne grinned. That's what I like to hear. And with that, the game changed again. The next morning, something was different. Chris wasn't the only one who felt it. Jamal, the rest of the team, even Coach Harris noticed a shift in energy. The soreness was still there. The struggle was just as real. But there was a new fire burning in each of them. Dwayne wasn't here to babysit them. He wasn't here to hold their hands. He was here to test them, to break them down and rebuild them into something stronger. And now, Chris was ready to embrace that. All right, listen up. Dwayne called out as they stood outside on the training field. Today's the day we separate the ones who think they want it from the ones who actually do. We're doing the gauntlet. The gauntlet sounded intimidating, and it was a brutal series of sprints, strength drills, bodyweight exercises, and mental endurance tests, all designed to push them to the absolute limit. Chris exchanged a glance with Jamal. This is gonna suck. Jamal smirked. Let's do it anyway. And so, it began. By the time they were halfway through, their bodies were screaming for a break. Sweat dripped from their faces. Their legs felt like jelly, but they kept going. Every time doubt crept in, they shut it down. Chris thought about quitting more times than he could count, but Dwayne's words echoed in his mind. Your heart, your mindset, that's what makes a champion. So, he kept moving. And then, just when they thought they had reached their breaking point, something crazy happened. They pushed past it. They finished the gauntlet. Every single one of them. Dwayne watched with a satisfied grin. Now that, he said, is what I call a breakthrough. Now that they had pushed past their limits, Dwayne took the lessons even deeper. You don't just train your body, he told them one morning. You train your mind. This chapter focused on mindset shifts, how champions think differently, how they handle pressure, and how they stay focused even when the odds are against them. Each athlete had to write down their goals. Not just what they wanted, but why they wanted it. By the end of the session, they weren't just training to win games. They were training to win life. Just as everything seemed to be clicking, a major setback hit. One of the team's best players, Marcus, suffered an injury. It shook the entire team. Doubt crept back in. If this could happen to Marcus, could it happen to any of them? Dwayne, however, saw this as another lesson. You can let a setback define you, he told them, or you can define yourself in spite of it. This wasn't just about physical strength anymore. This was about resilience. With Marcus sidelined, the team had to adapt. Dwayne worked with them to build not just individual strength, but team strength. It wasn't about one person carrying the load. It was about lifting each other up. They weren't just training partners anymore. They were a family. After weeks of pushing past limits, Dwayne gave them one final challenge. A grueling 24-hour test. No breaks. No excuses. Just heart, willpower, and the belief that they could do it. Chris, Jamal, and the others pushed harder than ever before. By the end, they weren't just athletes. They were warriors. The day Dwayne left, he gathered the team and looked at them with pride. You guys aren't the same people you were when I walked in here, he said. You've proven to yourselves that you're stronger, tougher, and more capable than you ever thought. Chris looked around at his teammates. They weren't just a struggling group of athletes anymore. They were something much greater, and their journey was just beginning.